Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Embodied Self Love podcast series. I'm your host, Elizabeth DiAlto. If for some reason you were landing here and it's your first time listening to the podcast, if you are watching here on YouTube, I'm literally holding my microphone today like a talk show host. It's just the way the setup works out today. But I'm pumped to get into, so this is episode number 6 in the series. It's episode number 343 overall in the podcast. So the show notes will be at untameyourself.com/343 to get links to anything that I mentioned in the show. We also pull quotes out of the episodes and post little timestamp things. So if you want to skip around or go back to something in the episode, that's the point of the show notes page, just to be useful for people who like to really dig in and extra geek out on stuff. So you can find that stuff over there. And as well, you can still join the self-love mini course if you are interested in that. If you've been digging these episodes, getting a lot out of it, and you want to take a deeper dive into what we've been talking about, the mini course has been amazing. At this time that I'm recording it, so far I've done the part 1, which was self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-knowledge, and then the Q&A for part 1, and I've done the self-trust and self-respect workshop. And coming up this week, actually the day that this goes live, so if you're listening to this on Wednesday, which is, what's today, the 23rd, 24th, 25th, so Wednesday, the August 26th, if you're listening in real time, the Q&A is actually this evening. So all of those things stay archived, and you can literally join the course anytime. So if it's like a year from now, 2 years from now, and you hear this and you're like, damn, I want to do that course, you can still do it. The recordings will be there. We host the details for all that over at wildsoulmovement.com/self-love. And you can either just join the course or you can join through the Embodied Living Center. And either way, you get access to a monthly community call that I host in the Embodied Living Center at the Institute for Embodied Living, which is my Mighty Networks space, my online healing center. So even if you join the course after it's already been recorded live, you could still come to some live monthly check-in and Q&A sessions and ask your questions there. So we love having it set up that way. So basically people never have to totally DIY. They can always check in if they want to. So far people have been loving it. I posted something which I'll share with you later today about this topic of self-respect that we're going to get into today on my Instagram. And someone did leave a comment. Hang on, let me find it. Give me a hot second here. Someone said, the mini course is like a deep exhale every time I listen in. Yesterday was amazing. Thank you for sharing. So, yeah, come on in if you feel like taking a deeper dive into self-love, okay? We're here for you. Now, getting into this episode, I have my notes per usual, so I stay as on track as possible. I love talking about self-respect. This is something I feel like gets lost in the mix of some of the bigger, more like hashtag worthy, sexier sounding things like self-love or self-care or even self-trust. Self-respect is huge, or even boundaries, which we're going to talk about next week. If you're not actively engaging in self-respect and identifying what self-respectful behavior looks like, it's going to be really hard for you to set boundaries. It's going to be really hard for you to integrate all the other things. So one of the things that I love about self-respect is that this is where everything else comes to be integrated. And then boundaries, which is kind of the bonus episode, the bonus topic here, because boundaries are not part of the self-love framework that I'm teaching you here, but boundaries are an incredible expression and product of actually practicing, actually exercising self-love. So let's dig into self-respect. I want to give you a quote that I don't know if I put in my notes here. It was in the course. Self-respect is where people-pleasing comes to die. Okay? So if you have struggled with people-pleasing, if you have struggled with putting other people's needs ahead of your own, if you have struggled with anything like that, self-respect is the place where that can really be alchemized through your actions and really laid to rest. So there's a lot of different parts and aspects of self-respect, but ultimately self-respect is how you treat yourself. It's how you talk to and about yourself. Self-respect honors all the other things that we've talked about in the series: self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and self-trust. Self-respect is the application and the honoring of all of those things. Self-respect looks at you as a whole being that is made of many parts. So that, and we talked about this last week in self-trust, so that you can be discerning in a way that honors and respects you. So let's talk about integrity for a second, because respect and integrity go hand in hand. Some people might not agree with this, and that's totally cool. Like in all the episodes, if something doesn't resonate for you, ditch it. Other things might. If something, triggers you, if you feel resistance, dig into a little bit more and see maybe why you're resisting it. I find often when I have resistance, I need to suspend my own beliefs, my own judgment, my own needs to be right, and just feel into something a little bit deeper before I go, that's not for me. Especially if I feel irritated, right? If it's resistance that comes with agitation, there's usually something there for me. May work that way for you, may not. So many years ago, a friend of mine said, the highest form of integrity is to honor yourself. And that resonated literally head to toe in my entire being, because all of my work is about coming home to yourself. All of my work is about self-love, healing, wholeness, and liberation, and pointing back to what is true, what is real for you, and what has been handed to you, laid on you, programmed into you, conditioned into you. How have you been socialized? So separating the socialization from what is actually true, what is actually yours, what's aligned with your soul, what's aligned with your purpose. What are your divine birthrights? Who are you? How are you made? What's true for you in this moment on your journey of your evolutionary path? So I resonated with that so much, because I can't tell you how many times in my life I had started things and then really, really, really didn't want to finish them. And I used to be someone, even something as simple as books, I used to be someone who would force myself to finish a book, first of all, period. If I started a book, I had to finish it. Second of all, before I could start another one. I literally remember the book I was reading. It was like 2007 or 2008. And I was like, I don't want to finish this book. It's like torture. And so I didn't finish the damn book. And I was like, oh, I could do this, right? So a lot of people will say, finish what you start, honor your commitments. But here's the thing. If you are a person on a healing path, on a growth path, someone who's committed to embodying your whole self, right? To honoring yourself as fully human and fully divine, all these things we say, right? A spiritual being having a human experience, you're changing all the time. And in COVID times here, which is, it's August 2020 at the time I'm recording this, so much is going on in the world and around us that we are just, our capacities, we are being stretched. Some of us, it feels like we're a different person every day. So to expect yourself to be fully aligned with something that you might have committed yourself to months ago, weeks ago, even a couple of days ago, might be an unreasonable expectation. So I want to invite you to hold yourself gently in your commitments and in the things that you start, and really be willing to cut your losses when you bump into something and you're like, I actually really don't want to do that anymore. And the feeling of forcing myself to would be so draining, it's not worth it. There are some things that it's worth showing up to, even if you don't want to. And this is where the discernment that we talked about last week really comes in. Sometimes it's worth it and sometimes it's really not. And that's an energetic thing that you really have to feel into. And even if you're not super attuned to reading that in yourself, the more you practice, the more attuned you get. So something I love to say is I reserve the right to change my mind. Sometimes you start down a path, by the way, I've seen this happen so much. Sometimes you start down a path so you can reach the point where you realize you have to pivot. I cannot tell you how often in my own experience of working in my own Akashic records and receiving readings and doing readings for hundreds of people now over the last 2 years, that even the guidance coming from the records, this higher source of wisdom and guidance that literally comes from unconditional love, unconditional light, and complete compassion and acceptance for you. Seeing you as your most sacred and honorable and worthy, loved and loving self, that the guidance that comes is the guidance that you need right now to just take the next step or get onto a path so that you'll bump into the next thing that you can pivot or that you could take a detour. Because you couldn't have skipped, right? This is like the alphabet. We don't go from A to C. We have to go to B. Sometimes we start down paths not to see them all the way through, but to get to the next step. It's self-respecting to allow that to be the case. So stop torturing yourself to finish things that you don't want to finish. And listen, sometimes we just have to put something, this is a metaphor, but it could be literal, on a shelf and come back to it later. Sometimes when we come back to things with fresh eyes, with fresh hearts, with different energy, it's actually the proper time to follow through on a thing. Again, going back to books, that's what I have found over the years now with books. Excuse me. I actually rarely finish books anymore. But I always find when I decide to go back, which could be days, weeks, months, even years later sometimes, when I open up and pick it up where I left off, it is literally uncanny how often it's like the absolute perfect thing that I needed in that moment. And that also, again, pings us back to trust that we were talking about last week. So something else that I want to talk about in the context of self-respect is the relationship between compassion and tolerance. I learned this the hard way. I think a lot of people learn this the hard way. We get fed these definitions of compassion, especially as women, that actually set us up to be overly tolerant of other people's poor behavior and poor treatment. Essentially, we are taught to take a lot of people's shit and sacrifice ourselves, abandon ourselves, and overextend ourselves just so we can maintain our status, image, and appearance of being nurturing, giving, loving, generous, and among other things. Nice, right? Polite, good, perfect, ladylike, all these things, right? But that's not compassion. Compassion is deep acceptance. It is not tolerance, because compassion is also deeply rooted in love and mercy and forgiveness and justice, right? So compassion is not asking us to tolerate poor treatment, abuse, bad behavior, continuously being hurt. That's not what compassion is. And we want to make sure in all things we engage with that we're doing it to the point that it still serves us, that it's still useful to us, right? If we are going to make a sacrifice, if we are going to choose to allow something to be a duty or an obligation, or if we're going to choose to endorse something that wouldn't necessarily be our preference, there's a higher reason for that, right? Ultimately, on some level, it satisfies you in a way, in a real way, that justifies it, right? Because something that I really want you to take away from this series is that we don't do self-abandonment anymore. We don't do disempowerment anymore. We don't make these choices that ultimately put us in the position of being the one who's hurting ourselves, who's abusing ourselves, as we continue to choose things that we know don't work for us, don't serve us, are not healthy for us on some level, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. And again, these things take time to stop doing. But as you stop doing them, you call your power back to yourself. You call your dignity back to yourself. You anchor into your truth. You anchor into who you are. You anchor into real integrity and alignment. And through this alignment, you will have more time, energy, attention, passion, purpose, energy to put towards the things that are actually really meaningful for you. And the reason why I give compassion as an example here is because I think a lot of people can relate to being in relationships with people where we tolerate poor behavior, lacks of integrity, massive incongruence, right? Incongruent being when people's words and actions don't match. And then telling ourselves we need to be more compassionate, right? Because there's always a good reason. We could justify anyone's poor behavior, but then we turn around and we're super hard on ourselves. That's not how it works, you know? We can be gentle, kind, loving, and compassionate with others. We can be gentle, kind, loving, and compassionate with ourselves without tolerating things that we should not be tolerating, right? So coming back here to self-abandonment, we don't deny ourselves anymore. We don't abandon ourselves anymore. We get to have needs. Our needs are just as important as everyone else's needs in our lives. And so I was talking about this. I mentioned self-abandonment in an Instagram post a couple weeks ago, and someone in the Embodied Living Center asked me to clarify self-abandonment, what it actually meant. And so here was my answer. My answer to that was, hang on one second here, because I scrolled to the wrong spot in my notes. Okay. Self-abandonment is when you put other people's needs and feelings ahead of your own, deny your own needs or desires, and minimize your own experiences. The minimize your own experiences, I just want to spend a little extra moment on that. That is something, if you have had any kind of codependency in your life, that's really a tough habit to break. For me, that's been one of the toughest because I do have a big capacity, especially if you're someone who is the strong friend or you're a strong person, which I know a lot of people listening totally identify or can at least relate to that. We can handle a lot, but that falls under the category of just because I can doesn't mean I should. So I gave a recent example. What self-abandonment started looking like for me in the relationship I ended about 6 weeks ago at the time I'm recording this was justifying all these reasons why the man I was dating's needs were more important than mine. And I'm not going to get into what those reasons were, but in my mind, they made all the sense in the world to me because they were super valid. And the thing is, even though all those things were true, even though all of those things were valid, it still didn't make my needs less important than his. So certainly in relationships, there needs to be give and take and compromise. And there's always going to be seasons where someone might need more of the attention and energy than somebody else. But what I had started doing in that experience wasn't that. I had started holding back anytime I needed anything, telling myself I'd wait for a better time to bring it up because he had so much on his plate. He was so stretched. He was really running on fumes. But the thing is, there was never a better time. So I was trying to take care of everything myself while also being there for all the things that he was going through. And this, again, is a tricky layer of codependency because he didn't ask me to do this. And it was humbling for me too, because I've been saying for years, I'm not codependent anymore. And for the most part, I'm really not. But I noticed, put me in an experience with someone I really love and really care about, who has a lot of shit going on in their life, where it makes total sense that, they need a little more attention. They have more obligations than I do. They have more responsibilities than I do. He had a kid. And it's easy to justify, and it's tricky, and it disguises itself like it's not codependency, but it still frigging is, right? Because he didn't ask me to do any of those things. I was just doing it. So once I started to correct course and speak up and actually say, damn, I've been minimizing my experience. I've had needs. I haven't spoken up. This doesn't feel good. It's not your fault, but I need to address it. And I need to carve out a little more space for me here. It became clear that he was not in a place to be in a more balanced relationship. So I had to go. And I mean, I loved this man a lot. I loved his child a lot. And there were some qualities that he had that I've literally been waiting my whole life to meet a man with these qualities. But I still had to go because self-respect is not self-abandonment, and I won't do it anymore. Might take me a minute to realize that I got caught up in it, but literally once I realized it, it was like 6 weeks, and then I was done. So here are some indicators of self-abandonment. You feel crappy, tired, hurt, rejected, depleted, and even resentful, and this is the big key, more often than you don't. You feel like you can't speak up when you need to because you're trying not to be a burden, etc. Even the idea that having needs is a burden at all is a signal that you're starting to abandon yourself or already doing it. At the very least, we need to learn to speak up. And then if we can't be met, we get to figure out what to do about it. But at the root of self-abandonment is not being honest with ourselves and others about what our needs are. And I'm not even talking about wants or desires. I'm just talking about needs. So I hope that makes sense for you all. I hope that lands for you all. There was something else that I meant to post this on Instagram, and I can't remember if I did. I also had shared that I received a big learning in this experience as well around the difference between unconditional love and energetically overextending myself. Love is such an intimate teacher and a catalyst, which sometimes comes not to last forever, but to transform us forever. So in this experience, I had to revisit the depth of conditioning I received in my Roman Catholic upbringing that was rooted in this old way where serving, pleasing, and giving at their own expense was the way of women. And I had to remember that a big invitation of the age that we're living in now is to break free from those ways and to choose something different. I might have already even mentioned this in the podcast series already. I'm kind of having a little deja vu here. If I did, that only means it was worth repeating. It bears repeating. So here's the deal. We can still be generous, but we need to pay attention to the implications our generosity has on our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. So this means we have to learn to take up space, allow our needs to be met, and be very intentional about who and how we're loving. And so by shifting more towards valuing and respecting ourselves, we help usher in more universally fulfilling ways of loving, and we leave those old ways behind. So I want to give you some reflection questions for self-respect. Just some ways to see, am I respecting myself, am I honoring myself, or am I leaning more towards self-abandonment or self-denial? Where am I putting myself last, or where am I just putting someone else's needs ahead of my own? And by the way, I'm not talking about small children, right? Let's use our common sense. And let's just know that I'm never frigging talking about a child that literally needs to be taken care of, or an adult that needs to be taken care of in a way where they are unable to take care of themselves. I'm not talking about people in those experiences. What am I tolerating that I don't want to be? And this has always been really helpful for me. It's like, how have I been feeling that I don't ever want to feel? So one of the things that I was noticing, and I'll come back to this thing that I said, when you're feeling tired, distracted, irritated, resentful, upset, hurt, more often than you're not. This is something I started noticing in that relationship, which is one of the reasons why I had to leave, was that as enjoyable as it was to be with this man, once some chaotic things had taken place in his life, more often than not, it was not feeling good to be in that experience. Days, because I care so much, and this also comes into the self-honoring, and it also points back to self-knowledge, which we already talked about. Because of how I am built, because of my sensitivities, because of certain traumas that I've had in my life, there are just some things that I'm just really not great at dealing with. Like, I will be distracted, right? I will not be able to compartmentalize a thing. It will derail my entire day. And what I was noticing was my days were regularly becoming derailed by something that was going on in his life. And I was like, I can't have that. And I work on that, right? That's on me to work on that, but also that's on me to honor that if I'm not there yet, there are certain areas where I don't know if I ever will get there. So I have to just not put myself in the position to have those experiences. That is self-respect, right? We deserve the love and the attention that we give to others so readily. We deserve to not be in these hyper aroused states all the friggin' time, especially when the world is the way it is right now. We're already processing and holding and feeling and experiencing so much. Our closest relationships, really, to the best of our ability and capability, should be relationships that are nourishing us, making us feel safe and loved and held and supported. So that's what I wanted to say about self-respect. Let me just scan down here and see if there was anything else. Yeah, let me read you the Instagram post from today that related to this. And I actually posted this before recording the episode. Here's what it said on the image. The hardest people to let go of or set boundaries with. This is actually a good segue to end the episode, since next week we'll talk about boundaries. The hardest people to let go of or set boundaries with are the good-hearted ones whose lack of self-awareness is constantly causing others harm. Good people hurt people too. Someone can mean well, care about you deeply, and still not be great for your life. Something I didn't distinguish in the Instagram post that I will distinguish here is there are some really good-hearted, great-natured, amazing people out there who just are not self-aware. They're not doing self-reflection. They're not doing self-inquiry. They don't know themselves. They don't see how their behavior is hurting people around them, is creating stress, strain, or burden on others. They don't see how their behavior hurts people. And I'll give you an example. A friend who leaves you hanging, like, you were supposed to spend time together. The time rolls around. They haven't confirmed the plan. And an hour and a half into the 2-hour window that you have available, you're like, hey, I'm taking this as this isn't happening. And they're like, oh yeah, sorry, like, and give you a laundry list of things that were going on. Meanwhile, you've been waiting around for 90 minutes, whereas they could have sent that text that would have taken 3 seconds before that and not made you wait or wonder, or maybe wonder, are they not okay? Like, what's going on? So even like little minor, mild stuff like that, where people's like, they're not aware. They're not aware of the impact of how they're showing up or not showing up and how that's affecting the people around them. That's what I'm talking about here. So here's what I wrote. I taught the workshop on self-trust and self-respect in the Embodied Self Love mini course yesterday, and the self-respect episode of the podcast series comes out this week. What I'm saying in the image today, is about self-respect. When you know yourself, what works for you and what doesn't, you start to get into the deeper nuanced layers of where your attention, energy, and efforts in relationships should go and where they shouldn't. I'm not a cancel culture person, and I'm not about overusing the label of toxic either. But when someone consistently causes you more harm than good, asking either if they belong in your life or if they belong in such a prominent role is important. It's also important to be honest about when harm is harm, even if it's not intentional on their part, and if anything is being done to repair it. Because here's the thing. And I ask us to be responsible in the same way, to be accountable in the same way, right? If something you're doing is bothering or hurting or harming someone else and they bring it to your attention and you don't apologize or you don't ask or do anything to repair it, right? If you just defend your position, well, I had this going on or this was happening or that's not what I meant, that is literally communicating that you are not capable of really being in a mature, adult, loving relationship with the other person, regardless of the context for the relationship. So who and what we give our energy to highly impacts the focus, flow, and rhythm of our lives, and we all have different capacities and tolerances. This is why it's also super important to acknowledge how different we all are, right? Something that bothers me might not bother you. I think I wrote that here. Yes, what is okay for you may not work for me, and neither of us is wrong. We're just built differently or at different places in our lives. This also means that sometimes it's us. Sometimes we'll have to accept when people choose to distance or even exit relationships with us as well. People will not always get why you refuse to stick around to be hurt by their behavior and choices. This doesn't mean you need to suck it up. Being misunderstood, misinterpreted, and mislabeled is part of the gig when you're healing, growing, and getting free. We can respect ourselves and also respect that damn quote that some people come into your life for a reason or a season or a lifetime, that is true. And some of us need to hone our abilities to identify the reasons and seasons and develop a deftness for moving on when they're complete, because none of us deserve to spend a lifetime settling for unfulfilling love. And that's self-respect. Self-respect does not settle. So on that note, thank you so much for tuning into the episode. I hope it was powerful, resonant, useful for you in some way. If you enjoyed it, please share it. Find me on Instagram. Leave me a comment. Share it in your stories. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment there. Subscribe. You know all the things. You know all the things to do. Again, if you want to check out the show notes, it's at untameyourself.com/343. If you want to check out the self-love mini course, that is at wildsoulmovement.com/self-love. And that's it, y'all. I really hope and pray and really wish for everyone who comes across this series that this stuff is really sinking in, and that you're realizing how special and beautiful and loved and cared for and deserving and worthy of all the things that we're talking about you are, and also honoring your own pace, your own timing, the divine unfolding of your own life, whatever's going on in your world right now. None of the stuff that we're talking about is super easy to integrate or digest, right? Some of these things you might want to come back and listen to more than once, so maybe it can hit you on different levels and in different ways, depending on where you are, depending on what's going on. These episodes are great to treat like a book club, right? With your friends, even if it's just one friend, to be like, did you listen? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? You can hold yourselves accountable, and then you can start to know, because we all need people. We all need people to reflect things back to us that we can't see in certain moments. So again, those are just a couple little extra tidbits to make it a little more useful and get the most out of the series. So hope it's been good for you. Thank you again for listening. We got 2 more episodes to go. Next week, we're talking about boundaries. The week after, we will wrap it up, do a little summary of everything, and I'll take some more listener questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer in that wrap-up episode, or if you have any questions about boundaries before next week, just send me a DM on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto, or you can email us at hello@wildsoulmovement.com. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in.